Hello there, kia ora. Parliament is back sitting after, I guess it's their equivalent of the school holidays for our elected officials, and it means we get another chance to see just how chaotic this government actually is, as well as some of their supporters. You see, yesterday we saw a bill dropped from the House because the government didn't have anyone willing to speak to its introduction. The bill itself is actually pretty inconsequential. It started under the last government, it ties up a few loose ends around things like social security and closes loopholes in outdated laws. It's not exactly exciting stuff, but it is bread and butter stuff for running the country. But the minister in charge of this, Louise Upston, was in another meeting. She didn't allocate a proxy of any kind, and Melissa Lee, who technically could have spoken to it, didn't. So it was dropped from proceedings, making the government look completely unprepared to fulfill its most basic functions. Oh, and then the day before that, the Deputy Prime Minister actually used a slur in the House that he aimed at Te Pāti Māori co-leader Debbie Ngarewa-Packer. It's a slur that's used against disabled people that recently saw Hamilton City Councillor Andrew Bidder make headlines, and of course, all of the MPs across the coalition were really critical of Winston for using this slur. No, of course they weren't. They actually laughed along with him for using it. Keeping it really classy there, aren't they? Oh, the final report into the abuse in state care was also tabled, and the Prime Minister's announced that he'll be offering a formal apology on behalf of the Crown, which is the right thing to do. While this week he was out there celebrating the opening of the First Offenders Boot Camp for Kids, a boot camp like the ones mentioned multiple times in that report that led to a range of abuse towards young people who were in state care. StatsNZ released our latest emissions tracking data yesterday, and it shows our national greenhouse gas emissions have increased for the first time in 5 years. This is just days after the government's much lauded climate action plan, which will see us no longer reach our emissions targets for 2035 and 2050, also putting at risk a whole bunch of free trade agreements that we've got across Europe and the rest of the world. Yay! In fact, climate scientists pointed out that other than saying that they'll supercharge alternate power supply methods in a plan that the government hasn't actually released, more than a dozen of their points within this plan are going to increase the emissions output for the country. And while the government starts telling people to prepare for the wonderful days of tax cuts, which less than 3,000 people across the entire country will get the full benefit of, retailers in some of our most high-end, busy areas of the country are saying that the current economic climate is worse than the global financial crisis and COVID lockdowns when nobody could go shopping because the economy is being tanked. Oh, our rightist right-wing mainstream media outlets are celebrating the Prime Minister's decision to stop press gallery interviews on the tiles outside the House, after criticising Jacinda Ardern for refusing to speak to one of them in her tenure as Prime Minister, and they can't seem to see how that looks hypocritical at all. In Invercargill, residents were really unsurprised to find out that a code of conduct complaint against Mayor Nobby Clark for his use of the N-word and homophobic slurs on TV was upheld, but were a bit disappointed to discover that Simeon Brown had decided to throw out the report that suggested stronger accountability measures for local elected representatives. So chances are his punishment will be to say sorry and not to do it again until the next time, which is still coming up because he's already been investigated for when the next time happened. Oh, and you may have noticed that the ACT Party is starting to really ramp up its rhetoric around race and what it considers equality. And that's because the Treaty Principles Bill is expected to be tabled this week. And Mr. 8% wants everyone to know it's not racist. It just strips away rights and protections guaranteed to tangata whenua under the founding document of this country, and makes it easy to justify refusing to work towards equitable outcomes for everyone and strip and sell off natural assets currently protected because that document, how it's seen and been interpreted and enacted by experts for decades. Coincidentally, if you're busy being really angry about the way that ACT keeps race baiting, you're far less likely to be asking questions like, why was David Seymour Snapchatting 14-year-olds? Or why did past party president Tim Yago suddenly resign? And what's he been up to lately? Look, all of this reminds me of a Douglas Adams quote. Human beings who are almost unique in having the ability to learn from the experience of others are also remarkable in their apparent disinclination to do so. And this government seems to really personify that.